Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist from Cambridge University, has cancelled his visit to Israel, which was scheduled to take place in June of this year. Hawking was supposed to speak at the Israeli Presidential Conference, a public relations event for promoting Israel's prestige through high-level visitors. Hawking explained the reason for cancelling his visit. This is his independent decision to respect the boycott based upon his knowledge of Palestine and on the unanimous advice of his own academic contacts there. I've spoken with Mike Cushman, a member of BRICUP and convener of the organization Jews for Boycotting Israeli Goods.
BRICUP is the British Committee for the Universities of Palestine. We were set up to bring attention to the dire state of Palestinian higher education under occupation and under siege, and to respond to the Palestinian call from PACB for the academic and cultural boycott. It's a collection of academics and university staff and a few others to campaign on this in the UK and to encourage similar action in other countries.
Part of the Palestinian call for BDS is the call for academic and cultural boycott. Stephen Hawking's decision to cancel his trip is conceived within the context of this aspect of the boycott.
The academic boycott is an institutional boycott, not an individual boycott. We don't boycott Israeli academics per se, but Israeli academics when they're representing their institution. So if a professor comes from Tel Aviv or Ben Gurion to talk about their research, no problem. If they come to promote their university in their position as dean or provost to talk about the glories of Israeli education, then we will boycott them. And we urge people not to engage in research collaborations with Israeli universities, not to for journals published by Israeli universities or to review for them or to go to conferences hosted by or organized by Israeli universities. That is the extent of the boycott. But the other way is we urge people not to go to visit Israeli universities, and even more, not to take part in propaganda exercises for the Israeli government. So it was not a serious academic event, it was a propaganda event to celebrate an apartheid education system.
BRICUP's campaign to convince Hawking to cancel his visit earned the organization instant fame in Israel, as Hawking's cancellation raised strong responses in the Israeli media and political sphere.
BRICUP worked with local Palestinian solidarity activists in Cambridge to encourage Stephen not to go. We knew that Stephen was sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. He said this on more than one occasion in the past. And we expected that if he was approached politely and with courtesy, he'd not want to take up the invitation. What he asked us to do was to put him in touch with Palestinian academics who would talk for themselves rather than for us as intermediaries. A number of distinguished Palestinian academics contacted Stephen, and in response he said to the Israeli authorities he was not going to travel.
The Israeli Presidential Conference invites celebrities.
Just wish they all showed the moral integrity of Stephen Hawking. By going, they're propping up a discriminatory and repressive regime. It's incumbent on all of us to bring attention to the daily crimes being committed by the Israeli state, which university staff and university as organizations are complicit in.
The pro-Israeli response to Hawking's cancellation came quickly. Cambridge University accused BRICUP of lying, claiming that the cancellation was due to health reasons. They later amended their statement and acknowledged that Hawkins cancelled his visit for political reasons.
Yesterday was really a strange day. I was besieged by emails and tweets calling BRICUP liars. And we were liars for telling the truth. It was Cambridge University that flip-flopped, that lied and then de-lied during the day. And I'm waiting for apologies from those who call BRICUP liars. They're very quick to send out the insults. very slow to admit their error.
Responses by Israeli organizations to Hawking's cancellation demonstrate the tactics adopted by the Israeli propaganda, or Hasbara as it is known in Israel. Rather than discussing Hawking's decision or defending the policies against Palestinians which led Hawking to his decision, Israeli response took a different angle. A right-wing Israeli organization, Shurat Hadin, Israel Law Center, whose motto is Terrorizing Terror, argued that the chip in Hawking's system, which allows him to communicate despite his motor neuron disease, has been developed in Israel. Shurat Hadin gave the comment to the conservative Free Republic website, which represented Shurat Hadin as a human rights organization, failing to mention that it is a right-wing organization dedicated to fighting Palestinian terrorism, but which defines the Palestinian government as terrorist. Yet the quote made its way to The Guardian, which also didn't identify the nature of the organization given the quote. The claim that Hawking's chip is an Israeli technology is based on the fact that Intel has one of its factories in Israel and may build a second one. The Israeli government has funneled hundreds of millions of dollars in grants to Intel to encourage the company to stay in Israel and to expand its production there. As the story of Hawking's cancellation shows, the reason is not just to create jobs for Israeli workers, but also to be able to associate Israel with the type of technology produced in Intel, as if Intel was an Israeli company, and as if technology can make up for discrimination, colonization, and occupation. But the choice to refer to Hawking's health problems in reference to his decision to respect the academic boycott and to cancel his trip to Israel is a rhetorical choice. Israeli organizations such as Shurat Hadin call Hawking's decision hypocritical, but the message is one of a threat. If Hawkins wants to use technology, he better not boycott Israel. If people will believe that they are dependent on Israeli technology and cannot live without it, this belief might deter them, according to Hasbara logic, from boycotting Israel. Hawking's cancellation has caught the attention not only of Israelis, but of the international community.
The significance is extraordinary. On the leading BBC News discussion program today, this morning, they had a Palestinian academic talking about the need for the academic boycott of Israel. That's never happened before. The BBC rarely talks to Palestinians and never talks to Palestinians who support boycott. This is a real first, and that would not have happened without Stephen's action.
The frantic responses in Israel and pro-Israeli organizations demonstrate the symbolic power of Hawking's move and the fragility of Israel's self-image.
The world-renowned British physicist Professor Stephen Hawking has joined the academic boycott of Israel by refusing to attend a conference hosted by the Israeli President Shimon Peres in protest at Tel Aviv's treatment of Palestinians. Hawking's move follows a boycott of Israel by the Teachers Union of Ireland and by the American members of the Association for Asian American Studies. BDS activists consider Hawking's decision a huge victory in the campaign for boycott, divestment and sanctions targeting Israeli academic institutions. In the past few years, dozens of artists, musicians and cultural figures have refused to perform or cancel scheduled performances in Israel in response to calls by the global movement for the campaign of boycott, divestment and sanctions. The Palestinian campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel, which was launched in 2004 by a group of Palestinian academics, cultural figures and intellectuals, say that boycotting Israeli academic and cultural institutions is an urgently needed form of pressure against Israel that can bring about its compliance with international law and the requirements for a just peace.
I think one of the most important forms of BDS campaign is the academic and cultural boycott. I mean, during the heydays of apartheid, the apartheid system of South Africa suffered from the sports boycott. And here, right now in Palestine, we are calling on international academic institutions, cultural figures, singers, writers, you name it, to boycott apartheid Israel until it complies with international law. What is extremely important for us is that our movement is a movement of civil society, and it calls for the implementation of international law. We have three demands. Demand number one is for the international community to impose sanctions against Israel until it withdraws from Arab lands it occupied in 1967. And we also expect Israel to implement United Nations Resolution 194, which calls for the right of return of Palestinian refugees. And demand number three is an end to Israel's discriminatory policies against the Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel.
In 2011, the University of Johannesburg severed ties with Israel's Ben Gurion University in a campaign backed by over 400 South African academics and the Nobel laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu. BDS Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions is a global campaign led by Palestinian civil society, which issued a call back in 2005 calling on the international community to boycott what they termed apartheid Israel, impose sanctions against it, and divest from it and from companies that invest in it, in line with the same policy that was used against the apartheid system in South Africa, which ultimately led to the collapse of the apartheid system in 1994.
One barometer of the success of the boycotts is that Israel has called them an existential threat. So they see the threat of the growing boycotts around the world. They need the Western appreciation and the Western links, the connections, culturally, commercially, diplomatically, that has always maintained their position, really. They need Europe and America to be continuously supporting. So they want to show that they call themselves the only democracy in the Middle East, when really they've got a military dictatorship, over 2.5 million people in the West Bank, and of course the siege and complete imprisonment of Palestinians in Gaza. So they are worried. They are worried that the West is going to gradually turn against them. The victories around the world have been huge. And they're growing not only on a symbolic level, which is on the cultural boycott with many famous musicians such as Snoop Dogg, Massive Attack, Elvis Costello, the Pixies, Faithless, and many others, Annie Lennox, all saying they will not perform in Israel. These are big groups.
For decades, Israel has denied Palestinians their fundamental rights of freedom, equality, and self-determination through ethnic cleansing, colonization, racial discrimination, and military occupation.
What we are actually calling for is an end to Israel's illegal policies against the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Palestinian refugees. We want an end to Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and Israel's policy of ethnic cleansing.
The BDS campaign has also attracted some leading Jewish peace activists, and one of the most effective solidarity groups are the Israeli group Boycott from Within, a group made up of Israeli peace activists who are encouraging the boycotts against Israel until it ends its oppression of the Palestinian people. Hasbara propaganda campaigns have been initiated by Israel to counter the damages caused by the growing Palestinian-led BDS campaign.
Actually, Israel tries to accuse BDS activists of trying to legitimize the state of Israel. And I will argue here that the effectiveness of the BDS primarily comes from being a strategy of nonviolent resistance and cross-border solidarity for advancing our rights.
Demonstrations, banner drops, flash mobs, workshops, as well as the annual Israeli Apartheid Week are different forms of actions organized by DS activists to raise awareness about Israel's apartheid policies towards the Palestinians and to build boycott, divestment and sanctions BDS campaigns. As part of a growing global BDS movement, Israeli Apartheid Week's rapid expansion, alongside that of the BDS movement, has arguably established the two as the most prominent global projects by Palestinian activists and their supporters. Students often play an important role in driving the growth of progressive movements, and the BDS movement is no exception, with a rapidly growing number of student groups working to pressure their universities to end ties with Israeli universities and corporations that are complicit with Israeli human rights violations. Palestinian academics and students have issued a thank you note to Professor Hocking, in which they express their deep appreciation for his principled position and for his support of the Palestinian civil struggle for justice and peace in Palestine.